Hey, deep divers, welcome back to the show. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the world of climate disclosures.
ESG.
Yeah, ESG.
Right.
But specifically, how companies are tackling climate change.
Right.
And guess what? There's a brand new guideline from the IFRS Foundation.
Wow.
It just came out January 30th, 2025.
So fresh. So fresh.
What's really interesting about this guideline is that it's specifically designed to help companies,
Okay.
especially those who are just starting out,
Right.
report their climate-related information, and it's all about providing investors with that much-needed transparency.
Okay, so we're talking International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB,
Yes.
and their new guidance on applying IFRS S1, which are the general requirements for sustainability-related financial information disclosure,
Yes.
specifically for companies focused on climate disclosures in accordance with IFRS S2.
Right.
For those of you keeping score at home, this means companies can now prioritize climate disclosures.
Yeah.
It's like they're allowed to build the roof of their sustainability report first. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It really captures that climate-first approach.
Yes.
You know, you can focus on climate, that all-important roof,
Right.
while ensuring that it aligns with the overall framework of their sustainability reporting,
Yep.
the entire house.
The whole house. So, but why the sudden rush to the roof? Is it just because everyone's talking about climate change these days?
Well, it's more than just talk.
Okay.
Investors are increasingly demanding transparency
Okay.
when it comes to climate-related data.
Right.
They want to know how companies are managing those climate risks,
Right.
opportunities, and what it all means for their investments.
Right.
And so the ISSB saw this demand
Okay.
and created this guideline to help companies meet those expectations.
That makes sense, but I'm a little confused.
Okay.
Didn't IFRS S1 and S2 already kind of cover all of this? Why do we need a separate guideline?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You see many companies, especially those new to this whole sustainability reporting thing, we're finding it a bit overwhelming
Okay.
to gather all the necessary data for both standards at once.
Right.
It was like trying to build a house overnight.
Oh, wow.
So this climate-first approach
Right.
acknowledges that reality and says, hey,
Okay.
start with the roof,
Mhm.
the most urgent part, and you can add the walls and the foundation later.
So it's like a stepping stone to ease companies into the world of full-blown sustainability reporting.
Precisely.
Okay.
It encourages more companies to start reporting their climate impacts
Right.
without feeling overwhelmed.
So even with this climate-first approach, companies can't just report anything they want, right? There have to be some rules.
Absolutely. The guideline is very clear.
Okay.
Even though companies can prioritize climate disclosures,
Right.
they still need to make sure that everything aligns with the overall framework of IFRS S1.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the roof still needs to fit the house.
The roof still needs to fit the house. So what exactly needs to be on this climate-focused roof? What are the key things companies need to report?
Well, the guideline outlines three main areas:
Okay.
risks and opportunities,
Okay.
greenhouse gas emissions,
Okay.
and climate scenario analysis.
Let's break those down, starting with risks and opportunities.
Sure.
What exactly does that entail?
Well, companies need to identify and assess both physical risks, like extreme weather events that could disrupt their operations, and transition risks.
Okay.
Think of things like policy changes related to carbon emissions
Mm-hmm.
that might impact their business model.
So it's not just about the risks of climate change itself, but also the risks that come with shifting to a low-carbon economy.
Exactly.
It's like companies need to be prepared for a world that's changing both literally and figuratively.
Exactly. And it's not just about identifying these risks, it's about quantifying them.
Okay.
Companies need to figure out the potential financial hit these risks could have on their business.
Because at the end of the day, investors want to know how climate change or efforts to combat it will affect a company's bottom line.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the second area.
Okay.
Greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, the dreaded carbon footprint. What are the specific requirements here? What do companies actually need to measure and report?
So companies are required to disclose their Scope 1 and 2 emissions.
Okay.
Scope 1 covers direct emissions from sources they own or control,
Okay.
like factories or company vehicles.
Got it.
Scope 2 includes indirect emissions from the energy they buy, like electricity.
Okay, so if I'm a company, I need to track those emissions coming directly from my operations and the energy I use.
Right.
But what about my supply chain?
Yeah.
Those emissions can be significant too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scope.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Scope 3 emissions are often the trickiest to track because they come from sources a company doesn't directly control.
Right.
Think of things like the emissions from the raw materials you buy or from the transportation of your products.
Yeah.
The good news is the guideline offers some breathing room here.
Phew. That's a relief. So companies don't have to report Scope 3 emissions right away.
That's correct.
Wow.
Scope 3 emissions can be deferred for the first year,
Okay.
giving companies more time to get their ducks in a row
Right.
and figure out how to collect this complex data.
Okay. That makes sense. It's like giving companies a chance to get their house in order before inviting the whole neighborhood over for a tour.
Yeah.
But even with this climate-first approach and the delay on Scope 3 reporting, there's still a lot for companies to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This new guideline is definitely a game changer.
So we've covered risks and opportunities, and we've talked about those all-important greenhouse gas emissions. What's the third area companies need to address in their climate reporting?
The third area is climate scenario analysis.
Okay.
It's a bit more complex than tracking emissions, but it's crucial for understanding a company's resilience to a changing climate.
Okay. Climate scenario analysis. I'm already feeling a little lost. Can you break it down for me?
Imagine you're a company,
Okay.
and you want to see how different climate futures might impact your business.
Okay.
You might consider a scenario where global temperatures rise by 2 degrees Celsius,
Right.
or a more extreme scenario with a 4-degree rise.
Okay.
You analyze how those changes might affect your operations, your supply chains, and ultimately your bottom line.
So it's like a what-if exercise for the climate, kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure, but with much higher stakes.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out how different climate scenarios could play out and what that means for a company's future.
Precisely. And the guideline is flexible
Okay.
about the methods companies can use for this analysis.
Mm-hmm.
They can choose either a qualitative approach, which is more descriptive,
Okay.
or a quantitative approach, which involves more detailed modeling and number crunching. The approach they choose just depends on their resources and capabilities.
So a smaller company with limited resources might start with a qualitative assessment, while a larger, more resource-rich company might dive into those complex quantitative models.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The key is for companies to demonstrate that they're thinking about the future
Right.
and considering how climate change might affect their long-term viability.
Right.
Investors want to see that companies are not just reacting to the current climate situation, but are proactively planning for the future.
And for investors, this climate scenario analysis provides those much-needed insights into how well-prepared companies are for those future impacts.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
It's all about transparency and helping investors make informed decisions in a world that's increasingly defined by climate change.
Okay, so we've covered the three main areas companies need to report on.
Right.
Risks and opportunities, greenhouse gas emissions, and climate scenario analysis. It seems like this new guideline is really pushing companies to step up their climate game. But what are the benefits? And what kind of challenges might companies face in implementing all of this?
Well, that's a great transition to the next part of our conversation.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
But first, we need to take a quick break.
Okay, so we're back.
And
ready to plunge even deeper into this world of climate disclosures?
Yes.
Before the break, we got into the nitty-gritty, the what's and the hows of reporting.
Yeah, right.
But now I want to know, what does it all actually mean?
Right. That's the crucial question, isn't it? We're not just talking about, numbers on a report.
Yeah.
This is about a fundamental shift in
Okay.
how we view business and its impact on the planet.
Okay, big picture stuff.
Yeah.
But can you bring it down to earth a bit?
Mm-hmm.
How does this guideline actually affect everyday investors like me?
Okay, so let's imagine
Okay.
you're looking at two companies,
Mhm.
both in the same industry.
Okay.
One has embraced this guideline,
Right.
reporting, clear data on their climate risks,
Mm-hmm.
their emissions,
Okay.
and their future plans. Okay.
The other is, shall we say, less transparent.
Okay.
Who are you more likely to trust with your investment?
Well, duh, the one that's putting all their cards on the table.
Oh.
I don't want to be left holding the bag if a company's ignoring climate risks and they suddenly get hit with a huge climate-related cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This guideline empowers investors
Okay.
to make informed decisions, not just based on, gut feelings, but on hard data.
Mhm.
It's like having climate risk X-ray vision.
Oh, wow. I like that.
You can see right through the noise.
So for companies, it's not just about avoiding penalties or looking good. It's about proving they're actually managing these climate risks effectively.
Yeah.
They could even attract more investors by being transparent.
Precisely.
Okay.
This isn't just about compliance. It's about creating a competitive advantage.
Okay.
Companies that are proactive and transparent about their climate strategies could find themselves attracting more capital.
Top talent, even customers who are increasingly conscious of sustainability.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be a real game changer.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, what's stopping companies from just cooking the books?
Right.
Making themselves look greener than they actually are.
Yeah.
We all know that happens.
Yeah, that's where assurance comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Think of it like an independent referee for the climate game.
Okay.
While the guideline doesn't require third-party assurance in the first year, it strongly encourages it.
So someone's checking their homework, making sure they're not just greenwashing.
Exactly.
Because, let's be honest, a lot of companies are good at talking the talk.
Yeah.
But actually walking the walk is a whole other story.
Exactly. And having that independent verification gives investors more confidence in the data. It helps weed out the companies that are all talk and no action.
Show me the data and prove it's legit.
You got it. And this focus on transparency is not just happening in the financial world.
Wait, so you're saying this goes beyond investors? Who else is paying attention to these climate disclosures?
Policymakers, for one.
Okay.
Having access to standardized data on how companies are actually performing on climate can be a goldmine for them.
How so?
Well, it can help them create more effective policies, target specific industries, and track progress over time.
It's like, instead of flying blind, they're finally getting a clear map of the corporate climate landscape.
Precisely. And it's not just governments.
Okay.
Consumers are also becoming more climate savvy.
Right.
And they're demanding more transparency from the companies they buy from. Think about it. If you see a company making grand claims about being sustainable, wouldn't you want to check if their data backs it up?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm way more likely to support a company that's actually walking the walk, not just talking a good game.
Exactly. And with this guideline, consumers and watchdogs have a powerful tool to hold companies accountable. They can see if those sustainability claims are actually backed by real action.
Right.
It's about turning up the heat on greenwashing.
So this guideline isn't just about tweaking financial reports.
Right.
It's about shifting the entire landscape.
Yes.
Making climate action a core part of how businesses operate, how they're judged, and how they compete.
You've nailed it.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental shift in mindset.
Okay.
From seeing sustainability as a nice-to-have to a must-have for long-term success.
Wow. Okay. I'm officially mind blown.
Good.
But you mentioned challenges earlier.
Yes.
What are some of the bumps in the road that we might encounter as this guideline rolls out?
Well, for starters, not all companies are created equal.
Right.
Some might struggle to gather the data or build the systems needed for this level of reporting.
Right.
Especially, smaller businesses with limited resources.
Right. It's like you can't expect a corner store to have the same level of climate data sophistication as a multinational corporation.
Exactly. And even with the best intentions. Comparing data across different industries can be like comparing apples and oranges. There will always be nuances in how companies interpret and apply the guidelines.
So even with this push for standardization, there's still a lot of work to do to make sure that data is truly comparable and reliable.
Absolutely. This is an ongoing journey, not a one-time fix.
Right.
It requires collaboration, innovation, and a willingness to adapt as we learn more.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint, but it's a marathon we need to win, right?
Exactly. The stakes are too high to ignore.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another potential challenge.
Okay.
The risk of unintended consequences.
Okay.
As we push for more transparency, we need to be mindful of how it might affect different companies and sectors in different ways.
So while shining a light on climate performance is generally a good thing,
yeah,
there's a risk it could backfire if it's not done carefully.
You're catching on quickly.
Okay.
For example, companies operating in high-emitting industries might face more scrutiny and pressure, even if they're making genuine efforts to transition to cleaner practices.
So it's not as simple as just saying, disclose everything and let the market decide.
Right.
We need to think about the potential downsides and make sure that we're creating a system that encourages progress, not punishment.
Precisely. This is about fostering a transition, not a witch hunt.
Right.
It's about recognizing that different companies are starting from different points and face different challenges.
So how do we make sure that this transition is fair and effective? How do we ensure that this increased transparency actually leads to meaningful action on climate change?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll explore as we dive into the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, you guys.
We're back.
We've been knee-deep in this world of climate disclosures, exploring this new IFRS guideline.
Yes.
And how it's poised to shake things up for companies and investors alike.
It's really a very exciting time.
And my head is spinning.
I bet.
But before we get lost in this whirlwind of climate data,
right,
I think it's time to kind of zoom out a little bit.
Yes.
And distill some of the key takeaways.
Absolutely.
For our listeners, wherever they are on their sustainability journey.
Yes. Let's crystallize those insights. First and foremost, this guideline is a big deal.
Okay.
It's not just some accounting tweak.
Right.
It signifies a fundamental shift towards climate-integrated financial reporting.
So what used to be considered a nice-to-have sustainability info is becoming essential financial data.
Yeah. It's like climate risks are finally getting a seat at the boardroom table.
They are. They're in the room now.
They're in the room.
So for companies, this means that they really need to up their game.
Yes.
Having strong ESG governance, robust data systems,
yes,
a clear climate strategy.
All essential.
No longer optional.
Table stakes.
Table stakes. It's like showing up to a potluck with a bag of chips when everyone else brought gourmet dishes.
Right. You're not going to impress anyone.
Not going to cut it. And investors are going to be scrutinizing those climate disclosures, making sure that they're not just window dressing.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to our second takeaway, and this one is for our investor listeners.
Yes.
Due diligence just got a whole lot more, well, climate-focused.
You're telling me investors now have a powerful new tool to assess companies' climate risks and opportunities.
Okay.
They can compare performance, cut through the greenwashing, and ultimately make more informed decisions about where they put their money.
It's like having a climate risk decoder ring.
I love it.
You can see beyond those flashy sustainability reports and get to the heart of what companies are actually doing.
Precisely. We are entering an era of data-driven sustainable investing where capital flows towards companies that are truly walking the walk on climate action.
Wow. Okay, I'm sensing a theme here.
What's that?
This guideline creates both challenges and opportunities for everyone involved. It's a bit like navigating uncharted territory.
That's a great analogy. Right.
It brings us to our final takeaway, something for everyone to ponder.
Okay.
This is just the beginning.
Doing it. I thought this guideline was a pretty big step.
It is, but this climate-first approach is just the first step in a much larger journey towards a more sustainable and resilient financial system.
So what's next? What does this road ahead look like?
Well, as climate risks become increasingly prominent, we need to ask ourselves, how might this increased transparency in corporate reporting affect other areas beyond finance?
Oh, wow. We've been so focused on the corporate world, but this could have ripple effects on policy consumer behavior, maybe even how we measure economic progress as a whole.
Absolutely. It's like we're changing the rules of the game.
We are changing the game completely.
And suddenly it's not just about companies disclosing their emissions or investors picking greener stocks.
Right.
It's about a much broader transformation that's only just beginning. So this shift towards standardized climate reporting has the potential to cascade through various sectors and systems, prompting us to rethink fundamental assumptions about value risk and long-term prosperity.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And here's where we leave you, dear listener, with a final thought-provoking question.
Ooh, I like these.
In this evolving landscape, what role will you play in shaping a more sustainable future? Will you be a passive observer, or will you seize the opportunity to make a difference?
That is a really powerful question. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Very deep dive.
We hope you found it insightful, and we encourage you to explore this topic further. Consider its implications for your own investments or business practices.
Yes.
But most importantly, stay curious.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.